Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we are talking AI, cloud software, procure-to-pay, and AP automation for the mid-market. My guests are Mike Fernandes, VP of Products, and Mary Miller, Director of Marketing and Channels at KwikTag by enChoice. We begin the conversation by looking at some of the very real benefits that AI is bringing to AP automation today, and specifically what KwikTag has been seeing as a result in the last year. We hear about the continuing growth of cloud-based accelerated deployment, a trend that Mike and Mary say has only increased since 2020. We also look at what makes investments in the procure-to-pay process so attractive to companies right now, and how AP automation fits in. And Mike and Mary share some insights into their product roadmap in areas like payment automation and new solutions for Dynamics products. All right, well, I'm here with Mary Miller and Mike Fernandes. Hi, Mary. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the podcast. Why don't we start with some introductions? Mary, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks for having us, Jason. This is Mary Miller. I'm the Director of Marketing and Channel with KwikTag by enChoice. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you. And hi, Mike.
Hi. Thanks for having us as well. I'm Mike Fernandes, and I'm VP of Products, KwikTag.
Well, I want to get right into it because you work in an area that has been one of the real points of discussion in the last year and a half. Automation, document management, getting away from paper has been such a common trait. When I think about where the market is going when it comes to documents and invoices, one of the really hot topics is AI. So I thought we'd just jump in there in the conversation. How has AI realistically fit into AP automation in your view? What parts of a system can it improve on?
Yeah, sure. That's a really great question. As you mentioned, I think a big part of what businesses are trying to do is to try to reduce or get rid of as much paper as possible. And when you look at AP automation, a big part of that is taking documents and being able to look at those documents and extract certain information off those documents, off those invoices, right? And then being able to make some decision on it. So, what we're seeing in terms of real impact in a lot of automation where it's realistically adding value is around the capturing of those invoices and being able to do OCR with it. When you look traditionally to traditional OCR systems, they're very complex to set up. They're not very accurate. And as soon as a vendor changes their invoice format, what ends up happening is they now need to go and set it up or retrain or set up another profile for another template for that vendor. So what we're seeing is and we released a product called KTIQ that is based on AI that removes a lot of those challenges, improves the accuracy because we're using AI, machine learning in it. So instead of looking at templates, and which basically is, where is a specific field of that we're looking for located on a specific document that we're OCRing. With AI and machine learning, it's kind of, like you and I are looking at a document and we're saying, okay, here's invoice number because it says invoice number on it. So that must imply that's invoice number. So what we're seeing is that the accuracy is so much higher as a result of it. The time to set up and get, launching with this type of solution is much faster as well, because now there's not this high complex, high cost for professional services to work with the customer to do all this. It's already there. Our KTIQ is based in the cloud. So even from that perspective, there's nothing the customer really even needs to set up on premise to do any of this. It's kind of you set up our KwikTag AP automation solution. It sends it to the cloud. We do everything in the cloud and we send everything back associated with that invoice back to the customer. So we really have seen a tremendous improvement in the accuracy, and it's providing real outcomes for customer as a result of it because it improves automation as soon as it's deployed.
That's really interesting. So this is out there. This is already sort of serving your customers and saving time on things that had previously been more manual or more human intervention.
Yes, it's been out there for about a year, and we're seeing even the automation that it provides because, for example, like if we can identify there's a purchase order that's being extracted, now we're adding another level of automation and intelligence because now we can pull certain information and validate certain information from the ERP system and provide a high level of automation because now we can say, okay, if this is a purchase order, we validated it with the ERP system, we can even retrieve some of those line items from the ERP system related to purchase orders and have that process now be different than if it's one that's not related to a purchase order, right? Maybe where it requires more indexing, more validation, whereas with a purchase order, we can retrieve things, we can automatically have that information presented to the user and then from that point, they can just send it right back into the ERP system for that invoice to be paid. So a lot more automation as a result of it as well.
And Mike, if I could just add to that, your comment about the whole indexing step is really enhanced by this, especially as people have claimed, according to recent research studies, that, about 74% of people say their number one challenge with their current AP process is that manual data entry and the indexing step. So the fact that we're automating that with an intelligent system like you're describing is really taking that number one pain away from them. So I think we're definitely headed in the right direction there.
I wanted to ask more generally about cloud as well. Obviously, I was recently looking at a report on this. I mean, most of the interest today is in cloud, right, Mary? But can you talk any more about sort of how specifically it's changing the value proposition for AP automation solutions when companies are thinking cloud first?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jason. Recent research has indicated that, about 80% of companies are expressing an interest in cloud. And, what's interesting is if we looked at, a year, 18 months ago prior to the pandemic, right, I think that number was much lower in what we were seeing, certainly. And people were beginning to think about it, right? But they were kind of taking their time and deciding if they had a cloud first strategy per se. And, if the last year taught us anything, it's you need to be able to work from anywhere, including processing invoices and approving invoices and having access to the data and the workflow throughout that process from anywhere. And the one thing that we saw the cloud really bring to life for those organizations was that they could access, just like you or I would, and in a web browser, web application, or a cloud-based application, you can go in and do your job and see the invoice data if you're the AP staff. You can review things if you're the manager or head of finance or CFO, and really have access to that whole process remotely. So I think we learned that digital access, the visibility into that process, especially with people being remote, was brought to life even more than it was, prior to the pandemic. But the flip side of that coin, that's the once it's up and running, right, which also takes that burden away from the IT team, because as Mike described, if something's born in the cloud, it's the software manufacturer provider doing that deployment directly in the cloud. But I think the other aspect of that is the entire project goes faster because there's kind of a defined set of requirements, of course, with configurations that can meet, customer use cases. But as a whole, the product is easier and faster to deploy. So we were able to respond to those kinds of requests much more quickly and get the solutions up and running in the cloud. Mike, anything to add to that?
Mary, I think that was a great explanation. Probably the only thing I would add is just the overall, even longer term cost after the system is up and running. The upgrades that customers no longer have to worry about as well. Features in terms of the product get introduced a little bit sooner as well. So I think the time to solution is reduced, as you have so nicely identified. I think even beyond that, features that as we introduce them to the product, the customer can now leverage is, I think, also a big factor in here as well.
One maybe related to sort of project topic that I've heard brought up recently, and I wonder if it applies in your experience as well, is that even in organizations where maybe some of the core systems are still on-prem and they're not moving them to cloud yet, that they are more likely to consider putting, say an AP automation type of solution in the cloud, integrated to their on-prem, because they know in the future, if they do move other core systems like ERP, having that already there in the cloud is going to just make their lives easier, for the foreseeable future. Is that sort of ever part of the thinking?
Absolutely. I would say that from a deployment standpoint, it's sort of make a short-term decision that's going to benefit you in the long run. And I think that when people are thinking about the future now, whether they plan to stay in an on-prem environment for a short period of time or several years even, they're thinking, eventually they know they will probably need to move to the cloud, or it's at least something that they're considering. So I think having all of those pieces, whether they're ISVs, all support a cloud initiative and cloud integration, is really going to come into play over time as well. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, 100% agree. I think, if they're going to make the investment, a lot of the customers are already looking to make the investment in the cloud instead of trying to bring something on-prem. So I think that's absolutely a consideration in the process.
I've heard you speak about the procure-to-pay model or process, as well as invoice process automation. Can you talk about how these are actually different and what procure-to-pay really requires from an organization compared to invoice automation? Mike, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. When we talk about invoice automation compared to procure to pay, it's like invoice automation is a piece of the procure to pay solution. With invoice automation, you're really handling one very specific process, which is the invoice approval, right? You have an invoice, an invoice comes in, and then you're, taking advantage of automation to improve that approval process for those invoices, right? Which is going to be, of course, provides tremendous value. When we look at procure to pay, we're looking to extend, and offer more capabilities and more value to the customer, because it's not only just the invoices we're looking at, as soon as a requisition is created, so someone needs to make a purchase, to then creating the purchase order, to then invoice comes in, to then making the payment. So it's the full cycle of that process. And that's something that, as we look to our solution, and we talk to customers, a lot of customers are looking for a solution that addresses all those pain points, right? Because there are pain points that come with each one of those, pieces of the cycle, if I may. So I think that that's a kind of a differentiation of those two. Certainly, invoice automation is really important, and it is a very important point. I think, when we talk to our customers, that's certainly a big area that they were looking to automate, especially during the pandemic, right? Because they have all these invoices coming in, and they need to be able to get them approved. And when you're no longer in the office, that is a very important part of it. So certainly important need for customers in the space, but there's the procure space is more encompassing. Barry, I'm not sure if there's anything that you would like to add as well to that.
Yeah, I would just add to that I think the payment aspect specifically that you're mentioning, Mike, is really important to kind of complete and round out that cycle that you're describing, because I think an area that it introduces that maybe isn't part so much of the AP process is kind of that fraud element, and the not only the visibility into the invoice and the payment data, but also the risk for fraud when people are still manually handling their payments. And I think that's an important problem that we're addressing with having a complete procure to pay solution, enhancing really and kind of filling out that AP automation solution. So it's definitely a challenge that people are trying to overcome as they look for the complete deal.
That's interesting. I mean, from my perspective, I know I've heard companies asking about tying payments into, invoice automation, or, maybe asking questions sort of around it when it's been talked about, framed as invoice focused. But it sounds like what you're saying is more organizations now perhaps are willing to take on the full process and maybe believe that there are solutions to, span that whole process.
For sure.
Yep.
All right, another pandemic-related topic that I wanted to touch on here, that the pandemic brought up other challenges: length of invoice processing time, other data management issues, payment error issues. Can you talk about some of those other challenges and maybe how you've seen your clients handle them, or maybe how you've been addressing it in the product?
Sure. Yeah, I think, Jason, what we see first of all is, a lot of the same challenges that people have sort of faced when it came to invoice workflows for years and decades even. It takes a long time to process an invoice, 45 days on average, if you're doing everything, 100% manually from the moment an invoice enters your building to the moment it gets, ready to be paid, kind of a thing. 45 days that has historically taken. Those same kinds of challenges and information getting lost and bills getting paid twice and things being paid late, all of those kinds of challenges have been associated with, invoice processes when handled manually, and they really carry over into the payment cycle too, which I think, to Mike's point, is one of the reasons that we are focusing on adding that solution, adding that piece of the solution, into our products as well, because people want a one-stop shop where once they've processed an invoice, paid the bills, sent it out, that they also then get some reconciliation data back, kind of that complete cycle from a finance perspective. And so accounting professionals have been asking us for years, is that something that you do? Is that something that we can expect to see? So, we like to be very responsive, A, to our customers, and B, to the market need. So that's one of the considerations that we took into account as we were looking to complete this cycle. So the reports that suggest that in the market didn't surprise us at all, and it just kind of seemed like a logical next step that we would address those same pain points on the payment side and be able to then provide that data back. Here was the invoice when it was approved. And oh, by the way, here's the payment information, the settlement data, the invoice number, the payment number, the date, all of that information at their fingertips, which goes back to that visibility aspect or lack thereof that we often have, especially now in this remote environment, right? But once we have all of that in one system, then they now have visibility regardless of where they are, because it's all very easy for them to access. So I think that really we're solving both the front end aspect of that by processing the invoice faster using the AI that Mike described earlier, but then also adding that payment information reduces the risk for fraud, of course, and then also addresses these processing time and payment errors and things like that. We had just a customer last week mention us that all of their vendors are mad at them because everybody's working remotely and nobody knows if they're getting paid on time. So it was really becoming a challenge that they needed to address this automation aspect.
Yeah, I can imagine that there's these blind spots that finance teams have now that they just didn't have to deal with before. All right. Well, what else are your clients asking from you right now? What other challenges do they want you to meet? Can you share any plans?
Yeah, actually, I think if we look at it from from our customers' perspective, certainly when we look at the Microsoft Dynamics space, we are seeing a lot of more growth in the Business Central space. So offering invoice automation and the payment automation part of it, supporting Business Central is certainly a key item and a key focus for us, and something we're going to be doing and releasing by the end of this year. And then as we move into, and I should mention, by the way, that cloud is also very important and kind of core to everything that we do. It's something that we have been doing, but certainly as we continue into 2022 and beyond, it's really all about cloud and making sure that our solutions are cloud enabled so that we can continue with that acceleration and all the value we just talked about in terms of cloud. The other big area and big focus for us as we go into the future, and specifically into 2022, is going to be around AI and providing more, using AI to provide more automation and removing some even further data entry in terms of the indexing that, what Mary was describing or mentioned as a really big pain point as well, which is to, leverage some of the AI to, for example, reduce the ability or the need for a user to select, the coding, right, where the coding is automatically done because, maybe, it learns based on the behavior that, the user always codes a certain invoice a certain way, right? So using intelligence and incorporating intelligence in that process is going to help that as well, even in terms of, where invoices get routed for approval, right? Incorporating intelligence in there. Maybe 80% of the time when I get an invoice in for a specific vendor or specific coding, it goes through these number of steps or based on the amount of the invoices, things like that. So those are things that we're going to be looking to incorporate into our plans to, continue improving the automation and reduce the data entry for invoices, as well as supporting other ERP systems. And then, of course, that whole procure-to-pay space, right? And offering more things there and providing more value for customers. So, vendor portal as an example where, be able to upload an invoice, be able to have self-service within that portal for the vendors as well. That's becoming, historically, I think it's been for bigger customers, that's been a requirement, but even, the mid-market and smaller customers need that capability as well. And that's something that we're going to be looking to offer to our customers as we move into the future.
One perhaps observation, and I haven't really quantified it, you can just tell me maybe if you've observed it, but as more ERP especially seems to be deployed as a SaaS model, it seems like partners like VARs are having more conversations during those implementations of bringing in ISV solutions earlier, especially ones where obviously they can connect and integrate in the cloud easily, and it's not as maybe heavy an implementation burden as it would have been in the on-prem world. I don't know. Are you experiencing that at all? That you're talking to companies earlier in their ERP life cycle when it's cloud-based?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, especially as you mentioned with partners, I think what traditionally was kind of a phase one, phase two approach, right? Phase one, get your on-premises ERP system set up, and then look to see where you need to have add-ons, where are the gaps, kind of do an assessment after the fact, and then reach out to the ISV community and see where the best solutions might be. Now, because everything's in the cloud, and all of those reasons and benefits that we talked about earlier, quicker deployment, easier to upgrade, easier to add features, those things are now able to be accomplished sooner in that process. So when we speak with partners about this, if they can introduce it at the time of the ERP system, if it makes sense, if it's a gap right out of the box. Many of them want to go to their customers with as complete a solution as possible. Sometimes, of course, it makes sense to still have a phase 2, but because it is much faster to get that solution in place in the cloud, a lot of them are looking to do, as much as possible, at least the 80-20 rule of what that client is ultimately going to need near the time of the ERP go live, or at the time, much closer to the purchase and the implementation phase. Mike, I don't know if you have other thoughts about that or anything to add.
No, I think you explained it really well. I mean, the value is there, and I think they can realize the value, closer to the deployment. So I think that because, as you mentioned, all those limitations are gone from the on-prem, I think people are looking to adopt it sooner rather than later, because it's less of a disruption too for them doing it sooner rather than, adding it on later.
If you have to train a model and everything right at once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Talking with both of you, it made me think that also KwikTag, your team has done some really nice videos and fun videos over time. For other people out there looking to plan maybe a video strategy or create their own, video content as a software vendor, do you have any suggestions, things that you've learned over time making your own?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to share. In fact, what you just mentioned, Jason, as you can tell, that part excites me because we do have a lot of fun with them. And I think part of our approach is we certainly want to educate our customers and our partners, but also we want to share that element of fun and creativity and innovation. And I think that carries through, certainly everything that Mike and his team are delivering on the product side, but also just kind of our company culture. So it does make it fun. I guess my one suggestion for if you're thinking about starting with a video strategy like that is just start small and begin with something as simple as your phone, and you'll kind of work your way up from there you'll know when you kind of get to the next level, right? When you're ready to add things like green screen and graphics and animation, all that kind of thing. But we started small. We started with people doing it in front of their phones and just kind of communicating really short bite-sized messages, because in this world of information flying at you 1,000 miles an hour, right, from all these different directions, people want, small bites of information that they can consume very easily, very quickly, and have a little fun with it. And so we do what we can to incorporate all of those elements. And so my suggestion would be start small and work your way up to your comfort level, and have fun with it.
Mary, Mike, thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you, Jason. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Mike Fernandes and Mary Miller of KwikTag by enChoice for joining me. Check out the links in today's show notes to see a recent video and read a white paper on the topics we discussed, or you can visit KwikTag.com to learn more. That's KwikTag.com to learn more. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.